Lara was not the kind of girl who liked to rush. She liked quiet things, the sound of leaves rubbing together, the slow ticking of a clock, and the way the sky slowly changed color in the evening. One soft afternoon, when the sun was already beginning to lean toward the hills, Lara decided to take a gentle walk along the small forest path near her home. The path was familiar, lined with tall trees that whispered softly in the breeze. She walked slowly, humming a quiet tune, watching golden sunlight dance between the branches. After a while, the path curved in a way she didn't remember. Lara stopped and looked around. The trees looked friendly, but somehow different. She whispered softly. Not worried, just curious. A small gust of wind floated through the forest and carried a dry leaf across the path like a tiny boat sailing over green waves of grass. Lara followed the leaf for a few steps, smiling at its slow journey. Soon she realized she wasn't quite sure which way led home. But strangely, the forest didn't feel scary. It felt calm, almost like it was inviting her to explore a little longer. Somewhere in the distance an owl hooted lazily, even though it was not yet night. Lara took a slow breath and looked up at the sky between the branches. The light was warm and soft, like a blanket made of sunshine. I guess I'm a little lost, she said quietly, though her voice sounded more thoughtful than afraid. She sat down on a smooth rock beside the path and listened. The forest was full of quiet sounds, leaves rustling, branches creaking, and somewhere nearby, water gently moving over stones. Lara closed her eyes for a moment, letting the peaceful sound settle around her like a lullaby. When she opened them again, she noticed something interesting, a very small wooden sign leaning beside the path, half hidden under moss. The arrow on it pointed deeper into the forest, and under the arrow someone had carved two simple words long ago, almost there. Lara tilted her head and smiled. Almost where? She wondered softly. The evening air grew cooler, and the sky slowly turned into shades of pink and lavender. Lara stood up, brushed a little dust from her shoes, and looked once more at the sign. She didn't know it yet, but the truth was something very surprising. Lara wasn't really far away from home at all. In fact, she was much closer than she thought. And the quiet forest seemed to know it. Lara followed the small wooden sign that pointed deeper into the forest. The path became softer under her feet, covered with pine needles that made almost no sound when she walked. The evening light slowly faded into a quiet blue, and the trees seemed taller and calmer, like patient guardians of the forest. Lara walked without hurrying, listening to the peaceful rhythm of her own footsteps. Soon she heard the gentle sound she had noticed earlier, the quiet trickle of water moving over smooth stones. The path opened into a small clearing where a narrow stream curved like a silver ribbon through the grass. The water moved slowly, reflecting the last soft colors of the sky. Lara knelt beside the stream and dipped her fingers into the cool water. Tiny ripples spread across the surface, and for a moment the reflection of the clouds wiggled like sleepy fish. "Hello, little stream," Lara whispered, smiling at the calm sound it made. She watched a small leaf float past her, drifting lazily as if it had nowhere important to go. The stream seemed to be traveling somewhere gentle and quiet, and Lara wondered where it might lead. On the other side of the water, she noticed another small wooden sign stuck between two stones. It looked very old, almost as if it had been there for many years. Lara carefully stepped across a few round rocks in the stream and walked closer to the sign. Moss covered most of the wood, but she could still read the faint words carved into it, "Keep going." Lara chuckled softly. "That's very helpful," she said in a sleepy, amused voice. The forest around her felt peaceful, not confusing. In fact, it almost felt like the forest was guiding her gently from one quiet place to another. Fireflies began to appear between the trees, blinking slowly like tiny stars that had decided to rest closer to the ground. Lara watched them with calm curiosity, feeling the cool evening air on her cheeks. She didn't feel worried about being lost. Instead, she felt as if she was on a slow, quiet adventure. The stream continued to whisper beside the path, and Lara decided to follow it for a little while. After all, streams often know where they are going. And even though Lara didn't realize it yet, the little stream was quietly curving its way in the same direction as the path that led back toward her home. She was still closer than she thought. The forest simply wanted to take its time showing her the way. Lara continued walking beside the quiet stream, her steps slow and unhurried. The forest had grown calmer as evening gently settled over the trees. The sky above was now a deep blue, and the first stars began to appear between the branches like tiny silver freckles on the night. The fireflies blinked softly around her, floating through the air like small lanterns carried by the wind. Lara followed the path until she reached a large old tree standing beside the stream. It was wider than any tree she had seen that day, its trunk twisted and strong, as if it had been standing there for hundreds of years. One of its branches stretched low over the path, and hanging from that branch was something unexpected, a small lantern. The lantern glowed with a soft golden light, warm and gentle, not bright at all, just enough to make the area around the tree feel cozy and safe. Lara walked closer and looked up at it with quiet curiosity. "Well, that's helpful," she whispered with a sleepy smile. The lantern swayed slowly in the breeze, casting calm shadows across the ground. Beneath the tree stood a small wooden bench, smooth from time and weather. Lara sat down and rested her feet for a moment, listening to the peaceful sounds of the forest. The stream continued its quiet song nearby, and somewhere far away an owl called again, its voice deep and soft in the night. Lara leaned back slightly and watched the lantern swing gently from side to side. It reminded her of the warm lamp beside her bed at home. For a moment she wondered if someone had placed the lantern there to guide travelers through the forest after sunset. Then she noticed something carved into the tree trunk beside the bench. The carving was simple, just a few careful letters, "You're close." Lara tilted her head and read the words again. "Close to what?" she murmured quietly. The forest seemed to answer with nothing but calm silence and the slow rustling of leaves. Lara stood up again, feeling rested and peaceful. The lantern's glow made the path ahead easy to see, and the stream continued to curve gently beside it. She followed the light for a few more steps, unaware of a small but important detail. Just beyond the next hill, not very far away at all, the roof of her home sat quietly under the stars. Lara couldn't see it yet, hidden behind the trees and the curve of the forest path. But the truth remained the same as before. She wasn't really lost. She was simply taking the long, peaceful way back. Lara walked on from the lantern tree, following the softly glowing path as it curved through the quiet forest. The lantern's warm light slowly faded behind her, but the moon had now risen above the trees, spreading a pale silver glow across the world. The forest felt even calmer than before, as if it too was getting ready to sleep. Lara's footsteps remained slow and gentle, almost matching the peaceful rhythm of the night. After a little while, the trees began to thin, and the path opened into a wide meadow. The grass moved softly in the breeze, rolling in quiet waves like a green ocean under the moonlight. Tiny white flowers dotted the field, their petals glowing faintly in the cool light of the sky. Lara stepped into the meadow and took a deep breath. The air smelled fresh and sweet, like wildflowers and evening dew. She walked a few steps through the tall grass, listening to the gentle brushing sound it made around her legs. It felt like the meadow was whispering a soft goodnight to the world. In the middle of the field stood a large, round stone, smooth and pale. Lara climbed onto it and sat down, lifting her face toward the sky. Above her, the stars were now brighter, scattered across the darkness like tiny sparks from a quiet fire. For a moment she simply watched them, feeling calm and peaceful. "Maybe being a little lost isn't so bad," she murmured softly. Somewhere nearby, crickets had begun their slow evening song, a gentle rhythm that filled the meadow with quiet life. As Lara looked around, she noticed something near the edge of the field, a small wooden post sticking up from the grass. Curious, she walked over to it. Just like the others she had seen, it was an old sign, weathered by wind and time. The words carved into it were simple, but clear in the moonlight, "Just ahead." Lara smiled again, amused by the mysterious messages the forest seemed to leave for her. "Everything seems to be just ahead tonight," she said in a calm voice. She followed the direction of the arrow on the sign and found another narrow path leading out of the meadow and back into the trees. The moonlight lit the way gently, and the forest ahead looked quiet and welcoming. Lara didn't realize it yet, but she was now only a short walk away from the familiar hill behind her house. The path she was taking curved slowly toward it, like a long, sleepy circle guiding her home. She was closer than ever before, though the night adventure still had a few quiet surprises waiting for her. Lara followed the narrow path that led away from the quiet meadow and back into the trees. The forest here felt different somehow, softer, calmer, almost familiar. The moonlight slipped between the branches and painted long silver shapes across the ground. Lara walked slowly, her eyes half curious and half dreamy, as if the peaceful night had wrapped everything in a gentle story. The path began to slope upward, turning into a small hill. It wasn't steep, just a gentle climb covered in soft grass and smooth stones. Lara stepped carefully as she walked higher, noticing that the trees here seemed shorter than the tall ones deeper in the forest. The air smelled slightly different too, carrying a faint scent she almost recognized. She paused for a moment halfway up the hill and listened. The night was quiet, but in the distance she thought she heard something very faint, a soft clinking sound, like a wind chime moving in a slow breeze. Lara tilted her head, trying to hear it again. "That sounds familiar," she whispered, though she wasn't quite sure why. When she reached the top of the hill, the forest opened slightly, and the land rolled gently downward on the other side. The moonlight spread across the small clearing like a calm silver blanket. Lara stood still and looked around. Something about this place made her feel warm inside, like remembering a dream she had almost forgotten. At the center of the clearing stood a wooden fence, old but sturdy, stretching quietly across the grass. Lara walked closer and ran her hand along the smooth wood. The fence seemed oddly familiar, though she couldn't immediately remember where she had seen one like it before. As she followed the fence line for a few steps, she noticed another small sign attached to one of the posts. The wood was lighter than the others she had seen, as if it had been carved more recently. She leaned closer to read the words in the moonlight, looked carefully. Lara blinked and looked around the clearing again, this time paying closer attention. The hill, the grass, the gentle shape of the path. Something about it all felt very known to her. The soft wind carried the faint chime sound again, a little clearer now. Lara smiled slowly, though she still couldn't see exactly why everything felt so familiar. She didn't realize it yet, but just beyond the next group of trees, hidden quietly in the moonlit night, stood the backyard of her own home. The hill she had climbed was one she had played on many times before. The forest hadn't taken her somewhere far away at all. It had simply led her in a peaceful circle. And the answer was now closer than ever. Lara stepped quietly down the other side of the hill, following the faint sound she had heard before. The gentle clinking returned, carried softly through the night air like tiny bells speaking in whispers. The path here was narrow but very calm, lined with small bushes and low trees that swayed slowly in the breeze. Moonlight rested on the leaves like silver dust. Lara walked slowly, listening carefully. The sound grew a little clearer with each step, soft, familiar, comforting. It reminded her of evenings when the windows of her home were open and the cool night air drifted inside. After a short walk, the trees parted slightly, revealing a small wooden gate standing quietly between two posts. Hanging above the gate was a delicate wind chime made of thin metal tubes and a small wooden circle. Every time the breeze moved through the clearing, the chime answered with a gentle, peaceful melody. Lara stopped and looked up at it, her eyes widening a little. "I know that sound," she murmured softly. She stepped closer to the gate and touched the wood. It felt smooth and warm, as if it had been touched many times before. The wind chime rang again, its notes floating through the air like sleepy music. Lara tilted her head, trying to understand why the place felt so familiar. The bushes beside the gate rustled quietly, and the moonlight revealed something else nearby, a narrow path made of flat stones leading forward through the grass. Lara followed it slowly, her heart feeling lighter with each step. The path curved gently around a group of small trees, and as she passed them, she noticed another wooden sign resting beside the stones. This one looked newer than the others, its letters carved clearly and neatly. She leaned down to read it in the moonlight. The sign said, "Almost home." Lara blinked slowly and looked around again. The air smelled even more familiar now. She could almost recognize the shape of the land, the quiet arrangement of the trees, the soft slope of the grass. The wind chime sounded once more behind her, its peaceful notes floating across the night. Lara continued down the stone path, feeling calm and curious rather than surprised. She was very close now, closer than she had been the entire evening. Just ahead, beyond a small row of bushes, something waited quietly in the moonlight. Something she knew very well. Lara followed the flat stone path as it curved gently through the quiet grass. The bushes beside the path rustled softly as the breeze moved through their leaves. The moon hung high above, calm and bright, lighting everything with a peaceful silver glow. Lara walked slowly, her footsteps making soft taps on the stones beneath her shoes. The air felt warmer here somehow, and the familiar smell she had noticed earlier became clearer. It smelled like the flowers that grew near her house every spring. Lara stepped past the row of bushes, and suddenly the space in front of her opened wide. She stopped. For a moment she simply blinked in quiet surprise. There, just a short distance away, stood a small wooden swing hanging from a strong tree branch. The swing moved gently back and forth in the night breeze. Lara knew that swing very well. She had sat on it many evenings, watching the sunset while her feet brushed the grass. Her eyes widened slowly as she looked around. The large tree beside the swing. The little garden bed nearby. The smooth stepping stones leading across the yard. "Wait a minute," Lara whispered softly. She walked a few steps forward, almost laughing in quiet disbelief. The place she had arrived at wasn't a strange clearing in the forest at all. It was her own backyard. The forest path had curved behind the hill and slowly led her right back home without her realizing it. Lara turned around and looked toward the dark trees behind her. The path she had followed was now barely visible in the moonlight, hidden between the branches like a secret trail. All those signs she had passed, the ones that said "almost there," "keep going," "you're close," and "almost home," they suddenly made perfect sense. Lara walked over to the swing and sat down gently. The wood creaked softly as she rocked back and forth. She looked up at the stars and smiled, feeling warm and peaceful inside. "So I wasn't really lost after all," she said quietly. The wind chime by the gate rang again somewhere behind her, its soft notes floating across the yard like a sleepy goodnight. Lara realized that the forest had simply taken her on a calm little adventure before bringing her right back where she belonged. And now she knew something comforting. Even when it felt like she had wandered far away, home had been very close the whole time. Lara sat gently on the wooden swing, letting it move back and forth in the cool night air. The quiet creak of the rope sounded slow and peaceful, like a soft rhythm guiding the evening toward sleep. From where she sat, she could now see the small house just beyond the garden. One of the windows glowed with warm yellow light, shining softly into the yard. Lara smiled when she saw it. That was the lamp in the living room, the one that always stayed on when evening came. It looked especially cozy tonight, like a quiet beacon waiting just for her. She stepped off the swing and walked across the grass, her footsteps brushing through the dew-covered blades. The garden flowers near the house swayed gently, and their sweet scent floated through the air. Lara paused for a moment and looked back toward the forest. The trees stood calmly at the edge of the yard, tall and dark but no longer mysterious. Now they looked more like friendly neighbors who had simply shown her a longer path home. She wondered about the signs she had seen along the way. Maybe someone had placed them there long ago for travelers who wandered through the forest paths. Or maybe, Lara thought with a sleepy smile, the forest itself had wanted to help her find her way. She walked closer to the house and stepped onto the small wooden porch. The boards made their familiar soft creak beneath her feet. Through the window she could see the gentle glow of the lamp. The comfortable couch, and the small table where she often left her books. Everything looked exactly the same as it had before she left for her walk, as if the house had been patiently waiting. Lara reached for the door and paused for a moment, listening to the quiet night behind her. The wind chime by the gate rang one last time, its calm melody drifting through the yard. She felt a peaceful happiness spread through her chest. Tonight had been a little adventure, but not a frightening one. It had been slow, quiet, and full of gentle surprises. Lara opened the door and stepped inside, bringing the cool evening air with her. The warm light wrapped around her like a soft blanket. She took off her shoes and looked back through the window once more at the moonlit yard and the silent forest beyond. She knew now that she had never been truly lost. She had simply taken the long way home. Inside the house, everything felt warm and calm. The soft lamp in the living room spread a gentle golden light across the walls and floor, making the space feel safe and sleepy. Lara closed the door behind her and listened for a moment. The house was quiet, just as it usually was in the evening. Somewhere a clock ticked slowly, counting the peaceful seconds of the night. Lara walked into the kitchen and filled a small kettle with water. She placed it on the stove and waited patiently while it warmed. Outside the window, the moonlight still covered the garden and the trees beyond it. From inside, the forest no longer looked mysterious at all. It looked friendly, like a calm place that had simply shared a quiet walk with her. Soon the kettle began to hum softly, and Lara prepared a small cup of tea. The gentle steam rose in thin curls, carrying a soothing herbal smell into the room. She carried the cup to the living room and sat down by the window. The tea warmed her hands as she looked outside. She could just barely see the wooden swing moving a little in the breeze. The wind chime rang again in the distance, its sound faint but familiar. Lara took a slow sip of tea and thought about the signs she had followed in the forest. Almost there. Keep going. You're close. Almost home. Each one had quietly guided her along the way, step by step. At the time she had wondered what they meant. Now she understood. She had been close to home the whole time, closer than she ever realized. The forest path had simply curved around the hill behind her house, making the journey longer and more peaceful than she expected. Lara smiled softly and leaned back in her chair. Her walk had turned into a small adventure, but it had never been scary. Instead, it had been calm and gentle, full of quiet sounds and glowing fireflies and sleepy moonlight. The kind of adventure that felt more like a bedtime story than a problem to solve. When her tea was finished, Lara set the empty cup on the table and stretched a little. The night had grown even quieter now, and her eyes felt pleasantly heavy. It was time to rest. But before going to bed, she took one last look through the window at the peaceful yard and the forest beyond. Somewhere out there, the small path still waited beneath the trees, curving slowly through the lantern tree, the meadow, and the stream. And now Lara knew something comforting. Even when a path feels long or unfamiliar, it might still be leading exactly where you belong. Lara turned off the lamp in the living room, leaving only the soft moonlight shining through the window. The house grew quieter, wrapped in the peaceful stillness of night. She walked slowly down the hallway toward her room, her steps soft on the wooden floor. Everything felt calm and safe, as if the whole house was settling gently into sleep. When she reached her room, Lara opened the window just a little. Cool night air drifted inside, carrying the faint scent of grass and flowers from the garden. In the distance she could still hear the quiet wind chime by the gate, its tiny notes floating softly through the dark. It sounded like the forest whispering a gentle goodnight. Lara climbed into her bed and pulled the blanket up around her shoulders. The pillow felt cool and comfortable beneath her head. For a moment she simply lay there, thinking about her evening walk. She remembered the small wooden signs hidden along the forest path. Almost there. Keep going. You're close. Almost home. Each one had been true in its own quiet way. Lara had believed she was wandering far away, deeper and deeper into the woods. But the truth had been much simpler. The forest path had slowly curved around the hill behind her house, guiding her in a peaceful circle. All along the way, she had been close to home without even knowing it. Lara smiled sleepily as she listened to the soft sounds outside her window, the wind in the trees, the faint rustle of leaves, and the distant chime ringing now and then in the breeze. The forest didn't feel mysterious anymore. It felt like a calm friend that had shared a quiet adventure before bringing her safely back. Her eyelids grew heavier, and her thoughts began to drift slowly like leaves floating along a gentle stream. Just before sleep carried her away, Lara whispered one last thought into the quiet room. "I guess sometimes we think we're lost," she murmured softly, "when we're actually very close." The moon continued to shine over the yard, the swing moved gently in the breeze, and the forest rested peacefully at the edge of the hill. Everything was exactly where it belonged. And Lara, warm and comfortable in her bed, had reached the closest place of all, home.